Jimmy McGill has always needed to hide the true version of himself, creating an appearance that didn't match what was at his core. At an early age, we see him reaching for a Playboy magazine and halting his responsibilities to look at the pictures. His father asks if he is sweeping, and he continues to read the magazine while pretending to do the real job. His father trusts him, but it's obvious that both his parents think he is someone else than who he actually is, as this seems to be the most beneficial course of action for his needs and wants. He stays off their radar in order to evade discipline while maintaining the facade of being a good boy. Jimmy soon overhears a grifter who is conning his father, and Mr. McGill is buying every second of it. It seems Jimmy's dad is used to being hoaxed by people who come into the store, making it difficult to maintain the integrity of the business. Mr. McGill's overly soft heart is the basis for his poor financial decisions, which lead the company to ruin in due time. Despite his best intentions, Mr. McGill is a foolhardy man who is never learning his lesson. Jimmy in turn sees his father as weak-willed and gullible, someone with consistently poor judgment. Jimmy is frustrated by how his father is not able to provide enough for the family, forcing Jimmy's mother to take a job within the business. A typical example of an Oedipus complex, Jimmy would prefer to have his father out of the picture. He sees father as a pushover who never provides enough for the family. On the other hand, Jimmy sees himself as the ideal candidate to be with mother. He is intelligent and will not fall victim to scams. We're seeing how Jimmy is beginning to formulate an adverse reaction to helping others. Due to his father's overly charitable acts and their impact on the family, Jimmy views welfare as wrong and dangerous. Helping others will only create problems. It's as if acts of goodwill are somewhat demonized. After the grifter has taken money from Mr. McGill, he speaks directly to Jimmy and instructs him to figure out if he wants to be a wolf or a sheep. He asks, "Are you going to be the one who preys on others or the one who is preyed on?" At that moment, Jimmy decides he will always be the wolf. He will take the complete opposite approach to his father and will not allow himself to be the one who is vulnerable to any form of deception. He was already living behind a mask, but this moment pushes him further towards a hidden existence in which his true self is tucked away from everyone, including himself. Jimmy takes the money from the register, beginning an existence in which he lacks trust in people, a way to defend against the pain of his childhood. So by becoming a false version of himself, someone who can't be hurt and can only be the one who causes hurt, his real self is not allowed to develop. This means he cannot form a consistent sense of who he is. He won't have any grounding or moral center. He will be at the whim of different situations, people, and emotions. The only thing anchoring him will be his need to be the deceiver and not the deceived. What takes place for his lack of self is the ever-present con man personality which is adopted early in adolescence. He becomes proficient and skilled at misleading others, at being the one who is always in control while leaving everyone else bewildered. There is an endless supply of suckers, projections of his own shadow side, in which he preys on people who remind him of his father. He spends these days with Marco as his partner, another con man who is equally invested in protecting himself from pain through constant wheeling and dealing. They fit together like hand and glove, as there is never a risk of closeness or realness. He is living the life of Slipping Jimmy, never being James McGill. But always wearing a mask comes at a price, especially when it comes to close relationships. Although he can be a con man and distance himself from most, he must eventually attempt some form of intimacy. It may be against his better judgment, as he is on the constant lookout for the possibility of being swindled. But what person can live without closeness? But because Jimmy doesn't know who he is, it also means he doesn't know what he stands for. And if he doesn't stand for anything, the only way he can function in relationships is by being what the other person wants him to be, often manifesting itself in codependency, attempting to receive the validation and approval he desperately seeks. We see this happen with Marco, in which he is able to be the con artist and fun guy that Marco prefers. But as soon as Chuck comes along, Jimmy changes his identity and tries to be a lawyer, one who walks the straight and narrow path, just like Chuck. Through obtaining a better object for receiving validation and attention, he drops his old ways and converts to something new. This is replicated when he starts to become close to Kim, while his relationship with Chuck is falling apart. Jimmy starts focusing on conning again, and becoming the fun guy who can provide Kim with the adrenaline rush she needs. His need to adapt to his circumstances is also apparent within his work with clients. Early on, he is the well-to-do and morally upright defender for the elderly, before becoming the low-life scumbag lawyer for his criminal clients at his future office. He looks to portray the image of what his object of affection desires. He is conforming to what he believes they want from him, never knowing what he wants for himself. This is most likely a pattern which developed early on with his mother, in which he needed to create an image of himself that will be loved and admired, even if it comes at the expense of truth and authenticity, at the cost of being his real self. So we're seeing how Jimmy has needed to use the persona to gain love, to protect himself from pain, and to avoid being taken by others, resulting in a lack of self and a need to overly identify with his closest relationship. This is extremely dangerous for Jimmy though, as he is often being lulled into a false sense of security with those closest to him. He believes he is safe, when in reality he is always at the whim of the other. It will be completely up to Kim and Chuck whether the relationship succeeds or fails, while Jimmy is just a passive onlooker. He cannot determine outcomes because his lack of self will not allow him to uphold the necessary boundaries and standards, instead needing to change himself to suit the situation. Ultimately, all of his relationships fail. He can never be what they want because he cannot be himself. And although a false identity has been with Jimmy since childhood, this personality is about to become more ingrained as emotional pain intensifies. Sometime after Chuck's harsh words and death, Jimmy officially creates the persona of Saul Goodman, giving a name and face to something which had been lurking in the shadows. It's apparent to him that the only way to deal with the pain he feels in relation to Chuck is by sinking deeper into the false self that protects his fragile ego. And although Saul is established after Chuck's death, it comes into full bloom following the departure of Kim. In Season 6, Episode 9, even before he sees her suitcase, Jimmy is groveling to keep Kim from leaving him. He is desperate not to lose another close relationship. How could she be leaving after he became exactly what she wanted? But Kim has had it with everything and eventually departs. We soon see the wreckage that this causes in the fully manifested Saul Goodman. He is seen sleeping with hookers, losing his hair from the stress of his hectic lifestyle, working as soon as he wakes up, all the while distancing himself further from any meaningful relationships. He is a shell of a person, sinking deeper into meaninglessness and image, while distancing further from his pain. Saul is a facade of glitz and glamour, which shields the hurt child inside. As we return to the black and white scenes with Jean, we see how Jimmy has gone from one persona to the next, constantly looking to hide himself. We observe his process of involving Jeff and Buddy in his hijinks, once again taking advantage of unsuspecting bystanders as a way to provide for his own personal gain. And while he is conning Jeff into thinking they are working together, he is doing the same to the mall security guard with another constructed personality. He takes advantage of the guard's weakness for sweets, so as to aid his heist plan, risking the man's physical health. Gene learns about college football all the while, becoming the avid fan that he needs to be so as to get what he wants. Marion and the department store employees are deceived as well. More examples of ignorant innocents who trust his words, not realizing what lies behind his empty phrases. Then, in episode 11, Jimmy has been able to get Jeff off of his tail, and it seems like he is ready to call it quits. But he soon speaks with Kim on the phone, and the conversation takes a wrong turn. He was looking for a reconnection, but is instead shot down and rejected. Jimmy is reminded of his inability to be what the other person wants, creating a feeling of worthlessness. He breaks the phone booth and smashes the window like during one of his old temper tantrums. He cannot stand the pain that has resurfaced from Kim's spurning, and so the only way he knows how to compensate is by returning to his old standby, the scamming persona he knows so well. He quickly regresses to a lifestyle reminiscent of the one which played out with Marco. He becomes immersed in a cycle of shifting personalities, scamming different marks, becoming lost in the facade while forgetting about reality. During this time, we see the pleasure he receives from making people think they know exactly what they're doing, before tearing the rug out from under their feet. Jimmy can be seen as trying to replicate in others the lack of self that he experiences. It's as if he is thinking, if I can't be sure of myself, then I don't want anyone else to feel that way either. And don't think it's a coincidence that he ends up selling their identities, as Jimmy holds little value for the life a person may have built up over years of work. Jimmy literally has nothing to his name, but due to his lack of self, he also has no identity either. A good reason for him not to value what others have made for themselves. In a flashback, Jimmy is shown in his office, bouncing a ball against the wall as a way to put off seeing Kim. He finally meets to sign the divorce papers, and he acts cold and distant, texting and ignoring Kim for the entirety of the meeting. He treats her like she is an acquaintance, showing similarities to how he dealt with events following Chuck's death. Kim is speechless at his indignant acts, and he tells her to have a nice life. It has become apparent the ways hiding from pain has impacted Jimmy. He has become a man who cannot admit to the truth. He is someone who is unable to care for anyone, not even himself. Relations with others are trivialized, and human decency is a thing for suckers, like his father. He doesn't respect his clientele at all, people who are in weak positions and have no leverage with him. He is someone who makes a living by taking advantage of the underprivileged, people who often have no other choice but to seek his services, and he does it all with a smile on his face. Then, in the series finale, Jimmy finally gets his time in court, and he walks in like a rock star, with an obviously flashy jacket that can be detected even through black and white filters. He says to himself, it's showtime, as he prepares for his final act on the biggest stage, the stage of his life. Jimmy is defending himself as Saul Goodman, indicating the way that the persona is taking the lead on all his upcoming comments. He provides a confession to the court, a confession he needed Kim to be witness to that day. It's what he believes the truth to be, but as I will discuss in another video, it's a type of truth that is manufactured and controlled while in service of personal motives. We can see his confession as a way to support the image of himself and how he wants to appear to Kim. He wants her to see that he is confessing. He wants to appear as if he is sorry for his actions, even if this is all the furthest thing from the truth. When he is finished, he looks back at Kim to see her reaction, and we see little James, who always looked to Mother for approval. He is asking Kim, "Are you proud of me, Mommy? Do you see how I am also sorry for what I did?" It's the act he has been performing since childhood, looking for approval and validation from the central object of his affection. It began with his mother, was transferred onto Chuck, and finally landed and stuck with Kim. He is still trying to be good Jimmy, the image of what he believes Mother desires. Jimmy is soon put on the bus to prison, and when he speaks with another prisoner, he attempts to deny the persona of Saul, claiming himself to be McGill. He may have fooled the court, but you can't con a con man, and they all see through this prank. He says he is McGill, but any semblance of that man has vanished, and all that is remaining is the persona of Saul. They begin chanting his name, and he tries to hide the smile, but he can't help but love that they respect him for his inauthenticity. He is going to a place where he will be surrounded by other men who have also been forced into lives of hiding their true selves. People who were not able to show their hurt. Kim soon visits Jimmy in his jail cell, and they have a cigarette with each other against the wall, sharing in one last bit of mischief before parting forever. She says, "You had them down to 7 years." He smirks about his ability to dupe the attorneys and the courts, and he looks again for her approval before she says, 86 years. He concurs before insinuating that he might do less with good behavior. If it was never clear before, it is now. This is all a game to him. It's all about his image and show, a show that he seems to be observing without much participation. They have their final conversation without any hint of sincerity or closeness. It all remains surface level and detached. The only thing that matters is who won or lost the game he is so focused on. As Kim walks away, you can tell it's difficult for her to leave him that way, as she knows Jimmy will never change. He will stay stuck in his persona till the bitter end, a metaphorical jail cell he created for himself. Meanwhile, Jimmy stands there alone, like he has always been, and makes the smoking gun signal at her. He believes it means something deeper, but Kim has moved past these games and walks away for good. Perhaps he wanted a response, some type of validation from her one last time, but the approval he wants will never be received. In fact, he never received the approval he desired from anyone. He wanted someone to make him feel like he was okay, like he was enough. Perhaps without the need for the personas and the constant hiding from pain, Jimmy could have been a heartfelt version of himself. He could have been the one to validate his own existence, which in turn might have been appreciated by others for its truth. But instead, the persona of Saul kept him locked away from any type of authenticity, as well as any real chance at human connection or love. It was a form of protection which resulted in a lifetime of suffering. This has been the psychology of Better Call Saul. 2 final videos coming up soon. Thank you for watching.